What's up guys, welcome back to Deck Tech for Decks. I'm your host Caleb. Today we're going to be looking at 5 very unique Landfall commanders. We've all heard it, right? You've seen one Landfall deck, you've seen them all. The 99 looks very similar. Depending on the commander, you can take a very good guess at the deck you're going to play against. But I guarantee you, with these 5 commanders we're going to be talking about today, they will not see this strategy coming. But before we get into it, I'd like to shout out the patrons. Irrelevant, you rock. Additionally, if you want a free $15, you can click on that whatnot link in the description down below. Additionally, just liking, commenting, and subscribing really helps out the channel. Now, without further ado, let's get into these 5 commanders. Kicking it off with number 5, we have Braesel Risen Nightmare. And I know what you're saying, this isn't a land-focused commander, but it is if we build it that way. What we're going to include is stuff like Walking Atlas, and then additionally we're going to include Realm Breaker. That way we can get additional lands into play, and then the goal is to sacrifice a land every single turn to get an insane amount of card advantage, right? Our opponents do have the option to sacrifice their lands as well, and if they do, we don't get our card advantage, but 9 times out of 10, they're just not going to sacrifice their lands, and then we get to draw 3 cards off of our opponents, and they each take 2 life. Another thing that's going to be very useful here is artifacts, right? If we're sacrificing our lands, we have to mitigate that somehow. There is some equipment we could use in this deck to help with that. There's a lot of equipment that searches up lands, and there's a lot of equipment that just flat makes lands now, so that's pretty cool. Additionally, we can just use regular artifact ramp, especially in mono black. We can easily reduce the cost of our artifacts, and with all of the extra card advantage we're going to be getting off of our opponents, it's going to be very easy to dump our hand, especially when we pair her with artifact reducers, right? If we reduce the cost of our artifacts and we play our mana rocks, our 2 CMC mana rocks, especially if they're only 1 mana, it makes it very easy to just play a 1 mana rock, tap that 1 mana rock, and then play another 1 mana rock. Right? Pretty busted there. So we can kind of make a land-focused strategy in mono black that's focused around sacrificing lands, bringing them back from the graveyard, and getting additional lands into play. No one's going to really think about that whenever they see a Braids lands deck, but yeah, the value we're going to get here is going to be insane. The card advantage is going to be insane as well. Moving on to number 4, I want to talk about Galia, Kindler of Hope. Now, on its face, this commander does not scream landfall, right? This looks like an equipment deck where you're casting equipment from the top of your library, which you'd be right. That's exactly what we're going to do. But we're going to play equipment spells like Sword of Hearth and Home. These are equipment spells that allow us to grab lands from our library and put them directly into play. And then whenever you're casting these equipment spells from the top of your library, she allows you to equip them directly to a creature. So now we get to play stuff like Colossal Hammer, cast that from the top of our library, and immediately equip it to our AC. That is now a 15/15 that allows us to play additional lands while drawing us cards whenever a land enters the battlefield. So they have a little bit more to worry about with this deck because we're going to be hitting, and we're going to be hitting hard, especially when we're playing cards like Blackblade Reforged that buffs all our creatures up equal to the amount of lands we have onto the battlefield. Not all our creatures, sorry, just the creature equipped, but you get what I'm saying here. We're mixing equipment and landfall, and I think that's pretty unique. Moving on to number 3, I have a deck for you guys that really like to see your opponents cry. We're playing Baloch. This guy effectively goads all of your opponent's creatures as long as he has more power than them. Additionally, we're going to be playing it with the giant background that makes Baloch a 10/10. That's going to be a total of 11 mana to make your opponent's life hell. But why am I putting this in a landfall list, right? This has nothing to do with landfall. Well, obviously, just looking at its face, we need a lot of mana to make this strategy work, so we're going to need to be playing additional lands and throwing additional lands into play. So we might as well be getting landfall value whenever we're doing that, right? We're in Gruul, use it. But that's not enough for me. We still need another reason to play lands. Why not play Living Plains as well? This is where your opponents probably start hating you, right? People don't like their lands being animated, and this is going to animate everybody's lands. So now everybody has 2/2 goated creatures except for you. And that's going to be a problem for your opponents until they realize that they can just tap the lands and they don't have to tap with them as long as they're utilizing the mana. And that's why we sadly have to play Curse Totem effects. Now they're not able to tap those lands and they just have to attack. Then you get to sit back, watch the chaos ensue, and probably never get to play with that playgroup again. But anyway, that's a strategy, and I'm not liable for any friends that you lose while using it. Moving on to number 2, if you allow me to put my tinfoil hat on for a second, I want to show you guys Mishra Imminent One. And I know what you're saying, this has nothing to do with landfall and it's probably going to be jank. But what if I told you this is the jank jank deck that can. What we're going to do is we're going to play artifact lands and turn those artifact lands into 4/4 constructs. Yeah, that's still not great, but hear me out. We get to play some very powerful landfall creatures like Mirage that gives us additional combat steps, and that's going to function very well with Mishra. We just have to make sure we play those lands on our main phase. So that also doesn't work. But we do get more activations of Mishra. Additionally, we get to play Roiling Elemental, which just yoinks our opponent's creatures, so that can be fun. I do want to say, mainly, I want to just play Eternity Vessel. That way we can keep resetting our life total. Then we get to play stuff like Doom Whisperer to go ahead and spend all of our life total, put a ton of cards in our graveyard, really set up the top card of our library, and then we can play a powerful Reanimator strategy that cheats all of these cool creatures into play. Then we're also playing some very powerful artifacts as well. What the lands are going to do is they're going to give us additional triggers of Eternity Vessel, making sure we can reset our life total, and this is effectively going to be a very powerful Reanimator deck that just has our life total going up, down, up, down, up, down, and like I said, it's probably going to be the jank deck that can, but I'm pretty excited to try this one out whenever I finish brewing it. If you guys want to see that, I'd be really happy to hear about it in the comments down below. Moving on to number 1, I have your reward for sitting through that last terrible idea. Hey, I don't know who thought about that idea. We don't talk about that idea. We don't talk about that guy either. Unless you want the deck, we can make it happen. I know the guy. But anyway, we have number 1 at Yuma. And Yuma is honestly one of the most powerful and unique landfall decks I've played in a long time. I just think this guy got a really bad rap because of the precon he was in. The precon he was in wasn't that great. It either popped off or did nothing. And people just have a bad taste in their mouth after playing a precon, trying it out. They think the commander's going to do great things, but the deck sucks. Not the commander, but they equate the deck sucking to the commander sucking, which kind of sucks. But whenever you take this guy out of the precon, build a dedicated deck around him, he just does some very stupid things. I mean, for instance, let's take Railway Brawler and Greater Good. Now, whenever a desert enters the graveyard, we get one of those 4/2s, but that 4/2 is actually going to be an 8/6 because of Railway Brawler. Now we can go ahead and sacrifice that 8/6 to Greater Good. We're going to draw 8 cards, and then we get to put more deserts into our graveyard due to Greater Good's ability. This allows us to do some very stupid things. We get an instant board state, and as long as we're discarding Anger into the graveyard, we're going to get a lot of those hasty cacti creatures that can instantly attack our opponents and allow us to win the game. Again, this guy just does some very crazy things, does them pretty fast, and honestly, it's just a super unique deck. You get to play some of your favorite landfall cards that you don't really get to see often in your other decks, like Titania. She cares about sacrificing lands, not necessarily lands entering the graveyard, so now we get another way to make some massive creatures off of some lands getting tossed into the graveyard after we sacrifice them. And again, it just ends up playing a lot differently. It's got a lot of unique cards you can only play if you're playing deserts, and it just allows yourself to, get that landfall goodness without having the same deck as everyone else, which is what this video is about overall. Guys, I do have some of these built and listed in the description down below. If you don't see the one you want, sound off in the comments down below and maybe I'll build it. With that being said, let's shout out those patrons, and I hope you guys have a great day. Irrelevant, the Professional Heal, Creator, Excessum, and Chicken Salad, you guys are amazing. I hope this helped you guys in your deck building endeavors, and I'll see you guys in the next one.